Good evening. My name is Mike Remington, council member and mayor pro tem for City of Duval. We're going to call together our city council committee of the whole for Tuesday, November 17th, 2020. It's now 5:01 in the evening. Our first item is good of the order. Council, any items to share? Not seeing any hands. Oh, we do. Councilmember Hoag.
Actually, I don't have anything to share, but I'm just curious if you can tell us whether there's an executive meeting or a closed meeting tonight, because I got
We do
a
have an
couple
executive
invitations and
meeting.
I'm not quite sure.
It's a closed session. It's item 5 on the council agenda, and it's collective bargaining is the topic.
I believe that there is an executive session that will be added to the end of the regular agenda as well, which the mayor will announce under additions and corrections. That was just decided on this afternoon, so that's why it's not on your agenda.
Great, thank you.
I'm
Michelle,
really,
answer the question, okay? Great, thank you. Well, we'll move into our main item tonight, which is continuation of the 2021-2022 biennial budget discussion. With that, we have a couple of hours here before council. I would like to try to end 15 minutes early. I think we all realize tonight's a busy night. We have a rather large council agenda following our cow. So I'd like to try to give you 15 minutes. So I'll do my best to try to get things wrapped up. We have more, another meeting for budget discussions. So if we don't get it tonight, or even on our next meeting, we can always add another meeting if we have to. Our goal was to try to get as many questions, all the questions in this week if we can, so that we can work on those and give the finance department time, give Dana time to help answer the questions. And then of course, even after the questions answered, the budget has to be adjusted if we make changes. I have 11 items left. We've added several today. There were some follow-up items. I believe we had several follow-up things that had not been answered yet. Dana, if you would please pull up our budget sheet, our matrix. I think we had down, we were going to go over CIP prioritization this evening, and I don't know if we were ready for that. I didn't see that on the council agenda or here if we were ready to talk about it at the cow. Steve, that probably falls under your bailiwick. Anything for this meeting, or would that be something we could look for at our next meeting?
No, sir, I'm ready.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. So this is, the question came up about, I don't think there was disagreement that the items, projects on CIP were all important. The question was, do we have staff time to get them all done, and have we prioritized? So Steve, I'll turn that over to you.
Pull up. One more second.
Steve, do you want me to unshare,
I want my computer to work faster.
or I could bring up your program edits PDF or table if you'd like?
I got it, thank you. And I can always, you can boot people off a screen share, right? Boom, you're out. See that? Okay, good evening, council, citizens, mayor, staff, Steve Laniszewski, Public Works. So at the, I don't know what meeting it was, 10/27, 11/5, we talked about capital projects. So in lieu of editing the actual budget document, this is a little grainier, and I hope everybody can see it. But what we did was I sat with staff, we went over the projects, looked at programs, projects, funding and timelines, and kind of put together some thoughts and options moving forward. Again, without changing, the master document and making work we may not want to engage in yet. So what you have in front of you is very similar to what is in the back of the preliminary budget book, but it's got some notes inserted into it. So I'm just going to kind of rip through some of the projects and hopefully answer questions, ease minds, let you know what we are hoping to shift some focus on and defer some things. So first off is the Main Street final design. I'm going to zoom in just a little more. This project, the design is complete. We are ready to bid it right now. So this will not take all that much engagement in the 2-year budget cycle. We do expect it to be bid and then completed prior to summer. So we are wanting to move forward with this project, as we also need to finish the account work up with 306 and complete the project altogether. Any questions, comments, thoughts? I think we just kind of go one by one. I see Dot trying to make haste here. She's on mute. Jody, can you unmute her? Mike?
Yeah, Dot, it seems like yours, it still shows up as being on mute. Try it
There,
now.
I-
Dot.
Yep.
There you go.
Am I okay?
Yep.
So if this is the final design, construction, everything, you're thinking design is finished in 2021, and then you'll complete the balance with the bond money in 2022. Am I understanding that correctly?
No, we will go to bid ASAP. The design's done for this. Is the rapid flashing beacons and speed feedback signs are part of the original 2017 project. So
great.
We were waiting on channelization approval from WashDOT called Chan Plan approval, and we received that late this year. So KPG's finished the paperwork. Sean's ready to put it out to bid, and it is very, very much physical installation. There's not a lot. They got to wreck a little bit of concrete out, but most of this is utilizing things that were installed on the Main Street project itself, as far as foundations and conduits. So it's mostly fancy signage.
Well, that's great. I love finishing projects, so
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep. Overlay. So the grant request from TIB, and TIB meets this Thursday and Friday, so we will know and adjust likely end of the week, early next week, on what grants we were and were not awarded. The overlay programming is light in the budget packet itself, but we did apply for $460,000 in overlay money. We could get that in full or in part. So not a lot there. We're kind of waiting on grant, and that work will the grant will prioritize what does or doesn't happen in the 2021-2022 cycle. I would expect, should we not be awarded any grant, we will probably update the budget to put together one of the overlays in 2022 and just hold tight in 2021. So that'll be the grant program. Any questions on that specific overlay? Street CIP. So I think the tact on this, should we win award, we will move forward. Should we not win award, we would obviously take construction off the table. But I think we still are recommending that this is a high priority corridor with a lot of activity and momentum in it. So we would recommend moving forward with design without any grant, and be ready for the next go round of grants, because shovel ready does get you higher grant ratings.
Yep.
So should we need to adjust something, I think what we would adjust on this might be consultant support and increase it, because a couple of the utility projects we are more than capable of handling, but we are going to recommend moving some off as I get down to the utility and doing design work instead of design and construction. So to space some of that work out. Also, because we have been awarded the $280,000 CDBG grant for the 142nd Phase 1 sidewalk extension between 278th and the 282nd. So that we are moving forward. We did consolidate. There was a stormwater retrofit project associated with, so we combined that. We'll make sure all the drainage issues in that area are picked up with this and mitigated within our project. So taking two and then consolidating them into one project. Telemetry, no changes there. It is on the move. It is heavily consultant and telemetry electrical contractor based work anyway, and it is necessary as we move forward. So there is no expected changes on F8. The bigger project, so F3 and 4, the 1.68 million is the current adopted, not the current in process CIP estimate. We recognize there's a lot going on, so we will move forward with design and engineering of this project and just push off the implementation until we get a couple of the other water projects out of the way. That'll help with workload as well as cash flow. And going into design will then give us a much better idea of the cost for the work. I don't want to, some people's kids. I don't want to throw it out the window, but, or I don't know how to say it really, but this work will happen irregardless of the cost. So I think the design will bring us to a better place of understanding the cost, and then we can budget for it a little more comprehensively than using an old number from the CIP. And this entails a lot of work. So this is coating the tank, not only inside, but outside, and mixing the inlet and outlet, as well as pump station review and upgrades. That pump station, kind of like the wastewater treatment plant, is built to expand in its piping network. So that that's something we need to get assessed very soon, and the design of that will be included. So that's kind of our one move to design only. This is just programmatic funding for work around the treatment plant here, so no change to the blower and repair monies. Mobile pump unit clarification: the budget number is accurate at 150,000, but I wrote 100,000 on the table, so that is in the budget, and that's more of a purchase. Parkwood drainage capacity is going to live with the sidewalk project, so they'll be co-mingled in funding and implementation. And there is a grant, the Sub-Regional Opportunity Fund grant. Should we need additional funds for the storm element, we have about $50,000 in the SURF pool for that. So we don't use that unless we have a specific project. So with nothing in mind, we hadn't figured on using that in the 2021 budget cycle, but we could use it in 2022 and just ask for it, and then we receive it.
Steve, can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
One thing I noticed is that if the project is only going to do design during this budget cycle, you're only showing that cost. I think it'd be really helpful if you showed the full cost of the project, even if we aren't planning to spend it, with the caveat that it would be a rough estimate. But at least for those looking at our budget, seeing, what are we doing, to understand how expensive are these projects that we're designing. Because right now, so maybe have all of the costs there, but then underneath say, well, we're only going to be able to accomplish design during the budget, and then only budget for design. But at least when you're listing the projects, show the full project.
Okay, let's.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Ooh, am I on mute?
Nope, you're good.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I'm trying to track everything that's associated with 142nd.
Mhm.
Okay, so we've got the sidewalk at 280, but that's just what we got funded. You're blending that with the storm project, which is another 200. Now the budget for the extension was on your budget sheet originally was 453. So does that mean that we're only spending on 142nd, the rest of the design money? I guess I didn't write it down quickly enough. I'm just trying to figure out everything that's going into 142nd, because obviously you're pulling from a bunch of different funds, which makes sense. It's a multi-craft project.
So so what we have on the books for the $200,000 design and implementation money under storm,
Yep.
we don't believe that's what it's going to take to do the storm work that is needed to augment any sort of storm extra work. So
Yeah.
I don't expect to spend the 200 out of that program. So I can't guess at this point. And when Dana talked about, which was a good idea, taking those two, the program for storm and the program you see here under the project, and merging those two, so we will sharpen those numbers together, because they're not
Right.
commingled yet. So
Yeah.
we'll do that in the next go round, and I can update that and edit it. But again, I didn't want to change CIP numbers like the 200 grand
Right.
until we have a better assessment, which it won't take that much. I don't expect, much detention augmentation up there. But I guess that's all I can say. We'll do a better job of combining them and trying to make some notes, I guess, on it.
Okay, so really what we're talking about then is the sidewalk extensions it's got a TDC right now, estimate of 453 and some change.
Mhm.
And then you're going to consolidate that with storm, plus or minus 200,000. And that's where we are on 142nd. Is that right then?
That's correct.
Okay, so then Parkwood and 142nd is something totally separate. Thank you.
Let me see. I don't think that's correct.
It's not.
No, this is so there was a stormwater CIP project specific to that area, not talking about curb and gutter and anything else. That was
Right.
before last winter. And for those who may not know, last winter we had a ton of activity up there with the floods. The mobile home park's pond overflowed. It went over the street, into the ditch, into Parkwood. So the majority of that work, prior to the city really understanding what was causing it, was coming from the mobile home park.
Yeah.
So the mobile home park this winter, at our direction and based on a part of the storm MPDES management, they have cleaned out their stormwater ponds, so there's much more space in it. They have reestablished the original ditch on their north side of 142nd to make sure that they conveyed the material, and then we have added a overflow implementation structure, which you can see right from the side of the road on that area, so the water can't do what it did last year. So I think there was a lot of presumption on that 200 grand needing to be spent to fix a flooding problem, which wasn't a flooding problem. It was currently unmanaged stormwater runoff from the neighbor, right?
Yeah.
But the neighbor is a big mobile home park. They have a new manager in the last year or two. She's very on top of it, been coordinating with us, and she has done her work. So this is going to get moved into the Grant Road project, and any drainage work associated with this topic will be facilitated in the project, but with this funding. And we don't expect it to take the 200 grand funding, but that's what's in the CIP, and I didn't want to change that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, so there's really three components. There's the block grant component.
Mhm.
There is the consolidation with storm at approximately 200, which is what you got right here. And then the 400,000 budgeted costs of 400 is I guess I am still getting lost. I see the Storm 200. What happens with the 400 again? I'm sorry, I'm really losing it here.
Again, these are numbers that are in our CIP. So
Yeah,
they will change. The 400 goes away. The 200 will become part of the Parkwood project above. And then we'll try to understand what it means through preliminary design and then move forward
see.
with design and then update everybody on the process.
okay, I'm good.
We'll change the table though and then consolidate and try to make the lines a little more clear.
Okay, I got it.
And then the Miller Street, I think that was at the last go round. No change there. It's an issue we need to address, and we'll try to get extra consultant help to help facilitate that. And then I'm going to spin. Don't get car sick. Sorry. And then this is the table in the budget packet itself. So I made some notes on this, and I can email it out. What we also discussed, and I'm going to zoom in on the titles and not the dollars right now. So items that are going to be like in their work types to bid together. So the capital facilities work, HVAC for City Hall and Police, we would put those together as one package with it's one advertisement with two numbers in it, right? So HVAC work at both, trying to consolidate the workload. 3rd Avenue I talked about, 142nd we talked about. The overlay, reconstruction, and the ADA ramps, those are all individual, the half a page items within it, but those are all essentially part of the overlay program, right? We repair the road before we overlay it, and then when we overlay it, we do the ramps. So those are 3 programs, all basically part of overlay. So it's not like we can cut one or the other. It's all part of the overlay program. Oops. I think we've seen notes to change Scouts projects to, what did we decide, like small parks projects or something like that? Which is fine and dandy. The sunshades, I didn't put an asterisk in there, but they would be essentially the same. If we have 2, we would be advertising, for the type of work at 2 locations. I&I programming, we'll work on cleaning that terminologies up, but the I&I repair, design, and alley CIPP work. So first comes design, then comes prepping the alleys, because that is before construction, because sometimes we may need to work on the alleys to see what's in the pipe network just to get to it, because all the sewer lines in Old Town are in the alleys, and some of them we can't currently get to, right? So that is going to be a little bit of a morph kind of task, but design is going to be the big part first. We will get consultant support on that, and then moving forward with a program to then implement, on an annual basis, so many feet of pipe, whatever we think will make sense. We will sit down with council prior to implementation, because our design needs to take into consideration finished product, so to speak, right? Alleys in Old Town don't all look the same. Some look like alleys that cars drive on, some look like people's backyards, some look like, a grassy knoll with a couple of planter boxes in it with shrubs. And so we will all need to get on the same page and discuss what that looks like when we're done. But so those are all the same element. And then moving the reservoir recoating, I'm going to zoom out a little bit, to a future year construction, but design and implementation now. And that'll change some of the beginning and the ending fund balances as we go. 2 of them for sure. If we don't get the grant for 3rd Avenue, will change drastically in the budget total. So that is the CIP summary.
Well, Steve, thank you. Are there questions from City Council on CIP projects, the prioritization or funding sources? Councilmember Naplin. I think we still have you on mute. Sorry.
Brian,
I think I hit it twice and I unmuted.
There we go.
So on the ADA project, it's not really on funding or prioritization, but it just reminded me that I've seen a lot of complaints about some of the design on those ADA ramps that went in around the hardware store and on the turn on First. They're very abrupt, and I see a lot of tire marks, people accidentally hitting them, having trouble parking. It's very narrow to get through there. It doesn't look like that project has a high enough dollar amount that the design would come to council. So I wanted to express how I felt right now while I'm seeing it. I don't know if there's other options to make those less abrupt.
so yeah, I don't think you need to go further there. So what we would do on any of our overlays is more in kind. If anybody's walked 275th, we're not changing the flow of the curb line like the bulb outs in Old Town, where they were, from my understanding, a little multifaceted to one, try to assist with parking in Old Town and access to side streets and try to control the access a little more. So we have no intention on doing bulb outs when we put this back. So what we would do is just like we did on 275th and 150th intersection right now, new ramps that meet the current ADA standard. So as long as they can be put back in the exact same place with different angles and slopes, we would do that. Sometimes you do have to chase grade a little bit, and you know, they kind of dip and move around and they create a flat pad. So that's the element. We're really not looking to change curb lines and flow lines with overlay curb adjustments and ADA improvements. So
Okay,
and
because
that would come.
even up in North Hill, there's really abrupt curbs delineating. And like, for example, if you're pushing a double stroller, like trying to get around and down these little ramps with these, you know, curbs on either side, I really feel like it creates more of a hazard, honestly.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is a standard. It is nuts. So
It's
that's,
very strange. And
yeah,
the community finds it strange also.
I don't disagree. The good news is I don't think any of our overlays in the current biennium are on roads that look like that. So we should be fairly okay. Because I think on Brewer Road, they don't cross longitudinally, they're parallel. So those are easier to mitigate. And then same with Roni. I don't think we have a cross on Roni that's got any slope to it. So I understand. And you will see those because when we do a bid for overlay, right, that'll be part of the bid package. So we'll see it.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Lingle.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm in my, I'm highlighting over here as well. So what I've got down here is your prioritization is finishing up Main Street, which is rapid flashing and channelization as example. And then there is on the overlay, we're going to find out next week. We have about 460,000 is our ask, but we don't know what we'll get. So you're just going to do whatever you can based on whatever that funding would be. And then you're asking to move forward with design on 3rd Avenue, whether it's funded or not. 142nd is now a project with multiple components. And it looks like when I go back through my notes here, that since we already have the block grant money and Consolidated Storm is available, plus or minus, you're going to be moving ahead with final design on that. Is that, do I have that right?
We'll wait until we get, I know we did receive a letter from our friends at the CDBG, but there's
Yeah.
no significant hurry. So we'll wait to have that finalized and then go through the selection process for a consultant and then, you know, work on the engagement element. So yeah,
So that one's design.
it's a work priority, but it's not like we want to start in January.
Got it. I'm just looking at the 2 years, you know, Then water symmetry, that's 388,000. You're gonna do design on that. Reservoir recoat, design and engineering, is that right?
So Dot, we're already engaged in telemetry design. The next
Yes.
stage would be going to bid for physical implementation and installation.
So design underway and we're going to bid, you think, in the next 2 years, in the 2 year?
I hope we're going to bid with some getting past, these types of meetings and council meetings in the next 2 months.
Got it. So bid this year. Okay, great.
Early.
And so mobile pump, it's a purchase, so we don't have to worry about that. Main Street, I know that was a big mess recently. So you're looking at moving on that. And then on the multitude of aspects under sewer CIP, whether you get the money or not, you're going to go ahead with design and you're going to want money from us for that. Do I have the basics?
Yeah, I think the bigger element too, which is not really consolidated tonight, is all the miscellaneous projects for facilities.
Right.
So
Yep.
obviously the remodel will work on, and I think you guys have access to that matrix file. So the one in the packet has certainly been updated as of, an hour and 10 minutes ago by me, but try to answer those questions too on, RFP for government facilities and working on a process for that. But yeah, the roof, getting roofs assessed and replaced if needed, window replacement, painting inside and outside of structures as presented, and then flooring.
Right.
So those are small projects, which and I know you're riding herd on this for the fact that it just, FYI, it takes work to get it done.
Yep.
No matter how small or how,
Yep.
how seemingly easy, nothing is as seemingly easy and small as it seems.
Yep. Yeah, small projects sometimes take more work than big projects.
Right.
Okay, thank you very much. I think this is great and we're going to see an update on this chart. Cool.
Great. Dina? Director Mason?
Thank you. Good evening, council, mayor, pro tem, and mayor. So I was hoping that we could just real quickly discuss the council member Naplin had a really great idea on how to use the bond proceeds, which makes a lot of sense. So I was hoping we could just get approval from council so we can put the resolution forth at the next council meeting.
I think that's on our matrix. Can you if it's on the matrix, could you bring it up, Dana, or was that separate? I remember seeing an email.
It was separate, but I have it. I just happen to have it right here.
Well, let's take a look at it.
All right. Can everyone see it? So here's before. There's actually an extra $100,000 that we're moving forward from 2019 and 2020. So the beginning fund balance is going to be higher than anticipated. And then that would leave $580,000 for property acquisition. And then we would still use the bond proceeds for this, the smaller projects. And for the office and garage remodel, we would use REIT 1 or REIT 2. And then that way, which I loved, we could help pay back the bonds with some park impact fees, about 25%, because it's 25% of the remaining principal. And then we could do splits of 25 REIT 2, street impact, and REIT 1 if we wanted to. So it was a fantastic suggestion. Just want to see if everyone's on board, because if so, then we will ask our bond counsel to put together the resolution.
Mayor?
And I just want to say before folks weigh in that Councilmember Naplin brought the meeting and we had a really good discussion. And of course, once you put a budget together, you've got your ideas, and this was a fantastic idea to funds. So administration's in full support.
Any questions from council before we maybe have a show of hands and support for that change? Councilmember Langle and then Councilmember Hoag.
Oh, I was just going to say, I attended the F&A meeting. I thought it was a great idea. And it gives us more flexibility on our facility study. So I think it's a great idea.
Councilmember Hoag.
I actually didn't have comments. I thought you were asking for us to raise our hands in favor of it, so. I
Oh,
am
there
in
you go. Well, I think we've got a motion. We don't formally vote here, by the way, but just as a show of hands, who would like to see that change? It looks like it's unanimous, Dana. So if you could make that change for us,
You
would
got it.
you, if we get a chance to add that to the matrix, I think that would be helpful for us tracking some of these changes.
Yep, I can do that.
Great. Well, I think we're ready to move on to our next item, but before we get there, I just wanted to recognize we do have a attendee with us. This meeting this evening started at 5 o'clock. That was announced a week early and posted on our website, but I realize not all citizens get to see that. So if you feel like we got started early, it's because we did. These are recorded, so you can go back and watch from the beginning. And we certainly welcome our citizens as they join us. Our next one that seemed to be up in the air was a negotiation, having an executive session. Sounds like we're going to have that this evening and be able to get an update related to, so we can understand how that relates to our budget. COVID-19 response funding for next year. I think that was just left blank, Dana. I don't know that we know right now. We're hopeful with the vaccine. We certainly see that there's some additional restrictions, I'll say, placed, and that there may be additional hardships both for our citizens, our businesses, and additional pressures on service organizations, which we've been able to help with funding in the past. The reason that was on there was just to be looking to the future. I didn't see anything in the budget for that. We do have human services funding that we normally provide, I believe, in the amount of 20,000. Thoughts on that from the mayor, from you, Dana? Mayor?
Yeah, we've had this discussion internally, and right now, I think, internally we'd like to wait to ask for additional funding because we don't know if there's going to be another federal package coming forward or what have you. And, we've got a pretty healthy fund balance, so I don't think it's going to be an issue affording things that we need that are outside of CARES Act or FEMA funding. But really at this point, we know we're probably in this another year, but there really isn't a way to predict what type of funding we actually need in the long run, because we have, to some extent, we've settled into a level of normal, but there may be more things coming down the line that we're not aware of at this point.
So Dana, if you could put a note in there that we are, anticipating potential funding, additional funding. I know that the federal government is looking at that, and the governor's been really good about passing some of that on to municipalities. Councilmember Lingle.
Yeah, I brought this up at a couple FNA meetings before, and then I talked a little bit with Dana about it also, which is that, we have two budget categories. One is human services, the other is economic development, both of which have very small amounts of money. And I think this is, I don't disagree with the mayor that, we really don't know. We really don't know what's going to happen in terms of a federal package or whatever. Regardless, if it's possible, when our old COVID expenditures are reimbursed and it looks like we're still doing fine, I would really like to see us at least have something in the notes that says that, that additional COVID response funding is a priority. We don't have, it's like other things, we don't have to actually have it in the budget. We could reserve money if the funds come in, and if they don't come in, they don't come in. But I think it's a gesture that would let the community know that we're thinking of them. And I'm very concerned about the business district, particularly the restaurants. I mean, if they are shut down much longer into 2021, I mean, I'm very fearful that we'll lose them. And if we lose them, we lose the core of Main Street. So I thought I'd put that sort of pitch out there. We also, had testimony from Senior Center about the need for human services money. And as I recall, we only have 20,000 in the budget for it right now. So if there's a way to put that up a little bit, since we do have a little more money, I think we should look at doing that as part of our deliberations.
Thank you, Dot. Mayor Okerlander.
Yeah, to Councilmember Lingel's point, just a reminder that we put the 20 for human services as a placeholder. And our
Yes,
expectation was that council would set a higher number after looking at the budget. So to your point, we do want to see that number higher for the biennium. It's just, we didn't want to set that number prematurely for council when we're unsure of where our revenues were going to end up. But yes, we definitely want to boost that.
I'll put a note so we can look back on many of these just to make a final decision on them, but that may be one we choose to up the amount. Director Mason, did I see your hand up?
No, but I was just going to mention, and it probably won't be applicable this time around, but to make the CARES Act expenditures eligible this year, it couldn't have been in the budget. So we couldn't have budgeted for it prior to the whole entire thing happening. So I can't imagine that they would say that for this next year because everyone's got a budget for different things, but it's just one thing to think about.
Any
that
other
makes
input from council members? I'll move on to our next one. On line 49, we had reserves. I believe our budget note there said that we were adding money to assure that we met the maximum amount allowable in the reserves. We had talked about adding a separate reserve for environmental emergencies. Director Laniszewski said that they do have money set aside for snow and other responses. And we were going to identify a line item for that. So it was particularly visible to us as a line item. So I just wanted to touch base and make sure that we could close the loop on that. It looks like our reserves accounts that we have will be fully funded. Is that correct, Dina?
Yes, so all the reserves that we discussed at the last meeting are, so the street fund has an ending fund balance of 2 months. And then Big Rock Park has enough reserve to cover the 50% reserve. So it's not built up to operation reserve. I don't know if council wants to go a little bit further and add even more money to that.
Any comments from council?
which item are we on? Are we on 49?
This was line 44.
Oh, 44. Oh, sorry, I went to 49.
Yeah, I think I said 49, but it's 44. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's all right.
Councilmember Naplin.
I do feel like Big Rock should have some kind of operational reserve. It just concerns me because we didn't really have that buffer this year. I think we ended up going below our reserve quite a few times during the year. Director Mason, you can correct me on that, but I think we ended up eating into the reserved fund balance for the turf replacement. So it does feel like, I mean, one thing to keep in mind, the 2-month operational reserve isn't necessarily a sufficient reserve probably for, an economic event where, suddenly we don't have enough revenue. I think it's helpful to have it there for cash flow. And maybe it seemed like there were a few times where our fund balance was below what we were supposed to have as a reserve for the turf.
Yeah, it's possible because of when transfers are done. So, transfers are done on a quarterly basis. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it goes a little bit below and then we do the transfer in from the general fund and it pops back up. But it does look like we're ending the biennium at the right level.
But with no operational reserve, basically.
No, they're
at the very lowest legal amount to keep the.
So we would, I can do that for this next round of adjustments and increase the general funds transfers in. So we increased them by 101,000. So now it's 136,000 that's being transferred in from the general fund. And then I can tell you how much more it would be.
So one thing I'm curious, we do have ending fund balance this year. Perhaps we could just seed that with an appropriate amount of money instead of increasing the transfer amount. Does that make sense? So ensuring it has an appropriate fund balance this year so that going into the biennium, we have.
Oh, I see. You're
Appropriate
saying
amount.
so transfer from the general fund as an end of the biennium budget adjustment.
Correct, so that it has an appropriate amount of buffer going into the next year. So then
So that would just
next
carry over.
biennium is more of an ongoing, what you would expect to be normally, not this catch up to create this buffer.
Okay.
Because it's really a one-time thing in
Yeah,
my
I
opinion,
see what
to
you're
try to
saying.
get an appropriate level.
That makes sense to me. We could do that this year. Is that make sense to you, Mayor?
Absolutely. And I think, this is part of the discussions we've been having internally as we've seen the ending fund balance, estimated ending fund balance grow, is that we're very conservative in our thing, but recognizing that we wanted to boost reserve areas as much as possible. So I think that that's a good way to set the baseline while we develop additional policies. So I like that idea. And anytime we can continue to boost or reduce that burden on the future years, I in general will support that.
Like that as well. It kind of underlines the intent of what we're trying to do here to support that fund. If those funds aren't needed for some reason, then they're just part of our budget and we can move them around.
Right. Exactly.
Well, thank you. Other questions on this from council? Not seeing any. Our next item is line 46, Dina. This is a street fund. I think the question was about operating margin, similar type question to what we just looked at. I don't know that we had an answer on that, or is this something that we can move to discussions after the budget?
I think this was actually addressed, but just by increasing by the beginning fund balance being adjusted, and then also increasing the transfer in from the general fund. So now there should be 2 months of operating fund balance for the street fund.
Great. Dina, when I'm looking at my computer screen, I see the column A and B. If we can slide those off, since there's nothing in those, and that way we can look at the description and notes.
Sure, you got it.
Is that working for everybody else? Sometimes my screen may not be what everyone else is seeing.
So maybe just hide column B, because what you're typing in that first column actually is kind of interesting to see what our resolution is as
We can
we're.
do that.
Could that work?
We can do that.
And I can make the notes smaller too. Does that fit on your screen?
And now I'm seeing more of the line E and F, so maybe we can slide it back just a little.
Okay.
Oh, are you zoomed in and that's why it's only showing to the right? Because I am actually seeing what's there.
Are you? Part of it, I'm doing a split screen as well, so I can see council members. So as long as everybody else can see it, I'm good. So our next item, these are lines 48, 49, and 50. It says that they may have been addressed, Dana, Mayor, which is why I wanted to circle back to these. They've either been addressed or not. and so maybe we just need an explanation on the notes. It says it may have been addressed on most of these, and that there might be a presentation tonight. So I just wanted to circle back.
Yeah, so this was the concern there wasn't a beginning fund balance for the new building and permitting fund, the 104 fund. And so what we did is we took the revenues in 2019 and 2020, subtracted the building and permitting expenditures for that. And then now that there is a fund balance, a beginning fund balance of about $614,000. So I think that addresses the concerns that was in this question. Councilmember Langle might be able to say yes or no to that.
I'm ecstatic. I'm very happy. How's that as an answer?
It's a good
Great.
answer.
Dina, thank you.
I have a question on that. Did
Question
you,
from Councilmember Naplin.
thanks. Did you subtract out what would have been overhead from that too? Because the very, because I wouldn't want to over transfer into that fund if in reality there would have been a lot of overhead if had it been.
No.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
It does make sense, but I did not charge the overhead to that fund since it wasn't really created in 2019 and 20. I mean, we could go back and recalculate the overhead for the biennium.
I'm just
And
wondering if
spread
an
it out.
approximation could be made because starting with a balance of 600 is pretty huge. I don't know. I don't know how much it would make. It just occurred to me that might be more of that belongs in the regular general fund.
Can I respond? Can
Councilmember-
I, okay, yeah, let me just say how I totally separate from Dana, I did this calculation. And the calculation that I did was based on information I've been collecting from building dating back to January of 2020. And what I looked at was just direct staff time. I did not get into overhead. I also, when I was calculating it, I also did not have information on inspections that were not related to new construction. And we have those obligations as well, but no revenue. And then the last thing I did not do was I only used the permit information that we know of right now. So if we have more permits come in than what are currently projected, this will be at a negative, actually, in terms of future projections. So the alternatives on this really boil down to either capitalizing it now or budgeting further capitalization in 21, 22. I mean, that's that. So you're going to expense it one way or the other if you're really going to cover those inspection costs, because these inspections are literally tied to the actual permits and a horizon that we know the construction will be complete. And it's based on 24 inspections at 30 minutes apiece per unit. And we already know that on the multifamily, those inspections are becoming more complicated, not less complicated. So I mean, like I said, there's really two ways to do it. Either you capitalize it and you're done, or you take some of the money and you do payments in 21, 22. But in the end of the day, you're going to need something like this to cover all your expenses.
To Councilmember Naplin's point, though, we do an end of the biennium overhead adjustment allocation based on actual. So there's no reason why during that period of time when we do that allocation adjustment, we can't charge to, think of the building permit fund as a separate fund in 2019 and 2022 and charge some of that allocation. It would just be done at the end of the, as we're doing our end of the year things.
Oh, I didn't mean it had to be officially charged. I just thought you had kind of behind the scenes calculated how much to start that fund out with. And so I was just saying when you were calculating that kind of on the side, that you could just subtract an amount that seemed like an appropriate overhead amount. But to have to set up the account ahead of time and do actual.
It'll be it will be different no matter what. I mean, because it's not going to be exact until next, until we close out the year. So it's not a problem to do it during that period of time.
Okay, I'll leave it up to you. I don't feel that strongly about it.
Okay.
I knew I should have taken that advanced accounting class. Thank you for that. Other input from council before we move on? I was going to start at line 57, Dana. I didn't know if this was an item for later discussion. This was a comment about, if I'm on the right one, public information coordination, supervision, staffing relationship to the city clerk. This does relate to budget. And so it's appropriate to have it here, but I'm trying to be as efficient as we can. This may be a discussion we can have later at a COW outside of the budget. Dot, do you agree with that? I see you nodding your head.
Yeah, I mean, I put this in there because I think it's I think it's tied to a lot of things we're already doing. It has to do with, you know, the salary study. It has to do with the workflow research that's going on. It really, and it boils down to sort of how do we want to organize our work? And so that's why I can't remember if I wrote it in here, is, you know, asking, I mean, really it's more of a policy directive that asks administration to come back to us with some of their ideas about how to align this work maybe differently than what we've done in the past.
Yeah.
And I guess the answer could be no, we're not going to, but I think the workflow analysis is going to feed into this discussion.
Yeah, I think it'll be a larger discussion. You know, it really touches on a lot of operational things for the city, which the mayor handles. But certainly, I think we like to have input, give ideas, and I think that's been supportive. But certainly, at the end of the day, some of that decision for what work and where it lines up, you know, is a really something administratively that gets done. But I think the mayor understands that we like to just be supportive and throw out some ideas and understand where they're helpful. Well, we'll move on to our next line item, 61. This is computer workstations. The issue here was we have about 70 workstations from our understanding, and we're talking about adding additional workstations, quite a few, or at least computers, I should say. And the question was, you know, is there higher priority to put money towards a new server, some of the software programs that we're looking at? And we're just trying to understand, you know, that's always a pretty size expense to add quite a few more computers. And I believe we were talking about 20. I don't know if I had that 20 number right, Dana, but then there's the ongoing costs because all those need to be replaced. So it's a cost that keeps going on into the future. So it's just the question here is balancing out, you know, the priorities and, you know, are we going to have enough for some of these software and server issues that we have to correct and improve on our technology. And I think those are huge dollars. We want to make sure we have enough as we look at where we're putting our money. Thoughts, Dana or Mayor?
So that's part of our 501. The charges to departments are for replacement costs for the servers, for the computers. So once they've been purchased by the department, then the cost, it goes over to the IT department basically, and it starts getting allocated to the departments depending on how many years of life each one has. And I think we have either 3 or 5 years for laptops and 5 years for desktops. It's right around there. Kevin's not here, is he? No. Yeah, but so we just use the suggested life from the IT department, and same with servers. We also have the servers on our list.
I'm sorry. So Dana, these are replacements, not new ones. Is that correct?
Yes, replacements.
So
Replacing existing.
Part of that question was we have, you know, about 45 employees and 70 workstations. That's not unusual to have a desktop or some just for efficiency, especially engineers need 2 or 3. In my work as a battalion chief, as an example, we had 3 so we could monitor what was going on with dispatch and all the other things that we have going on. So I understand that there's an operational efficiency to have additional, but I've also seen where we start getting away from having a fixed desktop unit. And for some employees, they just simply have a laptop it plugs into a docking station at their desk. And when they're done, they can take it home with them. They can take it to meetings. When they're at their desk, they're working off the laptop. I don't know if IT has looked into that. It's certainly a director's decision on what's needed. And I'm sure that Dana, you know, in the finance department, having multiple screens is a lifesaver when you're trying to work between things. So it's not right for everybody, but that's part of the question that's on the table here is, you know, is there a way to be more efficient with the number of computers that we have? And I don't know if we've looked at it. Maybe it's just a comment we're making here. We're not, I don't think, trying to change the budget per se. I'm sorry, Mayor Okerlander.
Yeah, I just want to say that about a dozen of those duplicate computers are for our police cars. So our police have special units in the car, and then desktop units or laptops as well. So there are some, one of the reasons that we've been switching computers is the services have not been working for folks. So there are some areas where I think IT is trying to get towards desktops and then having laptops to go. But in general, you know, I think the reality, when we have a device go down, we don't have backups. So for example, my city laptop has been down. Luckily, it turns out just to be a bad power cord. So I've been without a device for a couple of weeks. So right now, we have very few, if any, devices that can be put into action when something does happen. So one of the things I definitely want to see is having a couple spares on hand as well to make sure that we sure.
Yeah. You know, I think the question is just to help us gain understanding and see if there isn't, you know, some efficiencies we can gain or reduce the number we have. But it sounds like all that's been planned in, that we, you know, it makes sense that police cars have a fixed one. Those are usually very specific for PD and accessing dispatch and being able to do their paperwork. So I understand those. Makes sense. I appreciate your helping us with that question. Are there any questions, additional questions on that topic from council members? So not seeing any. Our next one is similar, line 63, accounting permit software. The software often comes with several modules, so you know pretty much buy the base programs, you add on the modules you think you need. And I think that what we were getting to here with this question is, you know, do we need, you know, can we hold off on buying too many until we actually try out modules, make sure they work in the city system? You know, we certainly need some base modules to get things started. And then maybe in the second year, add additional modules after we've had some experience with it. You know, that's really a director type question. I think, you know what we need, Dana, especially for accounting. I hope I got that question, the heart of the question down. Thoughts on it, Dana?
Yeah, so the RFP that went out at the beginning of this month has the general ledger, which has accounts payable, accounts receivable. I mean, those are things we have to have. Purchasing, which is actually new, so we don't have to do it right away, but it'd be extremely helpful in tracking contracts, because you can actually put a contract in as a purchase order and then pay off of it. And then a utility billing, of course, we need, and payroll. And so those are all kind of considered the financial application. And then the other application that we're getting is, of course, building and permits, the permitting module. But there are things we could add to the, we did ask for a fixed assets module, which would help us track our capital projects and our larger inventory. But that's something that could be implemented at a later date. And then we also asked for a project management module as well, which could be helpful with the, you know, of course, the costs for capital projects, staff costs for capital projects and stuff like that. But those are a couple of fixed assets, project management, purchasing. those probably could be set aside and come at a later date. But it, you know, if we were going to pull some out.
So that sounds like it'd just be part of our discussion, Dana, looking at the RFP, looking at what we need. Councilmember Naplin, you have a question?
Thanks. I'm glad this came up. So we saw we looked at the RFP during one of our finance committee meetings, and we had a little bit of feedback, and I never saw the end result of what went out. And some of our feedback was, or maybe I didn't, I just didn't notice it, but some of the feedback was there was a little bit of a concern that the wording of the requirements seemed to align very closely with what OpenGov advertised, just the language, how it was laid out. And you wouldn't want to signal that, hey, we've already chosen OpenGov. You're competing against these very specific components that OpenGov has. I don't know if that got resolved. And then the other thing was also just making sure that there was an understanding that you didn't, that to respond and to compete for this, you wouldn't have to have every single module. That there are, you know, other cities, even ones that have chosen, you know, OpenGov or other systems, they might choose a different provider for the permitting software. It might be a better fit, to be honest. And most of these, and I think that someone even shared this with us, that they often are able to speak to each other. You know, they're made to work with other systems. So anyway, I just want to make sure where that went after the feedback and the discussion we had, because I thought it was a great discussion. Anyway,
Sure.
Mason.
Yeah, so we did address that, and we changed it to a lot of the wording to, you know, from must have to would like, and we softened it a lot to kind of open it up. And just so you know, we posted on public purchase, we put it in a newspaper, it was sent out to over 3,000 software vendors, and all of the big ones like Tyler, Springbrook, a couple other ones have reached out and said we're going to submit a proposal. So the great thing about having an all-in-one is you don't have to do all that tying in. So if you can find an all-in-one, that's great. At my former place of work, we went out for an all-in-one, and we ended up going with one piece from one software operator from Excella actually, and the other piece from Munis. So we went to Excella for the permitting because the permitting department was like, this is much better for us. We don't like the way Munis looks. And we were like, please join us with Munis because it's gonna be so much easier, but they didn't. So, I mean, there's always that. There might be one piece of one software where that we're just like, this is so much better. So.
Okay, so the RFP is clear that we aren't requiring they provide every single piece, and we are allowed to choose certain pieces here and certain pieces there if that's preference.
Yeah, so no, it is not clear. It basically says that this is what we want. It doesn't say, it says we're looking for an all-in-one because that's what I thought we were looking for as an all-in-one. It's simple. It just makes it easier. But right. With that being said, if there's a piece from another a permitting software that Laura falls in love with, that will talk to whatever finance falls in love with, and the price is right, then why, you know, of course we would have to go that way.
Councilmember Langle.
Yeah, you know, I listened to, you know, the OpenGov conversation with different cities that participated. And one of the takeaways, I mean, I didn't hear anybody that was unhappy, but one of the takeaways was that people did add modules over time. And I actually called some other places that weren't part of that presentation and found that, you know, just what Dana said, people didn't automatically use all the modules. I mean, it's a little bit like, I think, you know, you buy a package of tools and, you know, some of them are really great battery pack tools, but, you know, so drills and so forth all work great. but then you come to the skill saws and they just don't get the power. I mean, I think that's the dilemma you have with this. But I actually came up with something else when I read our agenda for tonight, which has to do with our Snoqualmie IT interlocal agreement. And this is just an FYI, is there is a provision in there around whatever kinds of software and hardware we buy. They have some compatibility standards with their product, with what their services are. So I'm actually in some ways more concerned about the ongoing cost of any of this software, regardless of vendor, and making sure it's something that we can get technical assistance with over time. After reading that contract, because none of that is included in their hourly rate at Snoqualmie.
Dina?
So we are going for cloud-based. We said we were only interested in cloud-based software. So that's hosted on somebody else's server. We don't have to have server capacity. So there's less for a Snoqualmie IT to do.
Thank you.
That's not unusual for IT departments to have a list of things that they'll support. So if you have a department that says, hey, we want to go out and get this specific software and they don't support it, they don't support it. So you really do need that link, which it sounds like we would have from the vendor to provide updates and be able to troubleshoot problems. Dana, if you would please drop down to line 79. This ties into this a little. This just came in today. And this is related to software. It says, today I realized that the city software RFP went out already. Thinking of this, why would we go out to RFP for something prior to it being approved by council? Maybe this question should be added to the matrix. I think the deadline should be extended to January for submittals. The deadline is November 30th to submit RFPs. And the rest of this is just saying, who makes that decision and who has the authority to move it forward. This, well, it could be discussed away from the budget. It certainly is a big part of our budget. So I don't want to get too much into the whole RFP piece, but if it just seems like it ties into our last question about software and programs. And Dana, if you or the mayor could just touch base on this question for us, please.
Sure, Mayor, I'll go ahead and start. Well, the whole thing started because Snoqualmie was going out for a request for proposals to get rid of Springbrook. It just wasn't working for them at all. And they asked us if we wanted to join their proposal. And so we sat in on 2 of their demos. So they went out for requests for proposals. They got 3 replies, just 3. And one of them was from Springbrook, which they said no thank you to. The other one was called Vision, I believe, and it's not cloud-based at all. And it's actually a step. They're better reporting applications, but it's as far as being clunky and not having workflow. So since we have so many different buildings, we need something with workflow where we can put an invoice in and Steve can electronically approve it. So we're not having paper flowing around and getting lost. And Vision just said, well, our software is really more for one person does everything. So for really small towns. Vision or Munis, that software was extremely expensive. I believe the cloud version, I did a matrix for the FAC, but I think it was about $2 million for a 10-year commitment, which is a lot and too much for our city. So we reached out to, had heard that OpenGov was coming up with a financial software. We reached out to them, had a demo, loved it. They gave us a proposal. We told them it was too expensive for our city, and they came down in price. And so we were like, okay, let's see if council is interested in this. And then we got advice from after talking with the FAC and our city attorney, we got advice from the city attorney to go out for a request for proposal. There's an RCW that's specific to technology proposals. And so that's what we did. And I mean, if the proposal, so if everything goes well and we are able to select a software, it probably wouldn't be until the end of December, and then implementation probably wouldn't start until next year. So it's actually really great timing if we want to get software, a new financial software next year. It doesn't mean that we have to, but we'd really like it. So, Mayor, do you have anything to add?
You know, we can have Daniel address the specifics of normal processes for RFPs. But normally, you know, an RFP isn't necessarily whether it's for employment or anything else. But as far as process for approval and who decides, in general, just like any other RFP that comes through the city, staff evaluates and scores the proposals and then makes a recommendation and brings it forth to council. So those areas where it's the council part is financial, the operational part is what software is going to work best for the city. And we can have Daniel send out a note on, you know, specifically RFPs, but you know, you definitely don't have to have something before going out for RFP, because part of the purpose for RFP is seeing who and what companies are qualified to do the work. So you know, you know, we can, if folks want to have more of a discussion about that, we can ask our attorney to the council meeting.
I think there was a really general support for replacing the system. I think we understand that the Springbrook, you know, is just outdated, and that we needed to look for a new accounting program. And it could be Springbrook, it could be, you know, like you say, OpenGov or others. So I think we're headed in the right direction, but it is a lot of money. And I think the question, you know, that has come up in the past as well, just asking, you know, are we following those procedures? Have we locked into someone without really being open to looking at everything that's there? And it sounds like with the RFP process, we're asking anybody and everybody to put in, and then we can evaluate those, and then those will come forward, you know, with a recommendation to City Council. And so we'll get a chance to take a look. It's just, you know, I don't know what a number is on this, Dana. You know, looking at the budget, there's different pieces, and we have put some money aside. What's the estimate roughly? Not for any one company, but just what's it cost to replace
Right. So about $200,000 for implementation. And then I believe so we're asking for a 10-year commitment as far as yearly maintenance fees. And so something like Munis is around $100,000, and something like OpenGov is around $56,000. Springbrook is less expensive, around $35,000 maybe for their cloud services. Just depends on what you add. So, but what we pay right now is $17 a year, plus any additional training, 17 to 18, and it, you know, you get what you pay for. We put in a lot of time trying to get reports and get information out of there. So, yeah.
I found that very helpful. Questions from council? Input. Councilmember Lingle.
Yeah, I was just going to say, when I looked at this item in the matrix, what occurred to me was really one more of sequence. Because, so you have an RFP out there, a lot of staff time invested in it, and we haven't determined what the budget authority would be. And, you know, I'm not, so to me, when I look at this, that was the thing for me, because having been on the Finance and Administration Committee, at least in finance, I have a pretty good idea of how inadequate Springbrook is. So that part has been less of a concern than just sequence of an RFP happening before budget authority is established, because you could get a package come in that is way more expensive, and then we've got to go back and shuffle again. So that's the way I was looking at this bullet.
Other comments from council? Councilmember Brunicki.
Hi, hold on. Just from the years and years, I remember the days when we didn't even have a software. And I remember the days when we were hanging onto a thread, wondering if our whole system was going to crash. So I can certainly understand that technology and the investment is critical. Even for my tiny little business, I have to invest a ton of money just to be technology on board, up to date. So I can't imagine when you said 17,000, that just blew my mind. Like, really? It's that cheap? So whatever you figure out as far as what is going to work with our current situation and what we have to do, I trust that the staff is, they're working with all of the technology. And over the years, it's been so disappointing with Springbrook, and watching the inefficiency of that technology, that I would really welcome a change. And because it just kills me, all the money we probably waste in inefficiency. And so, yes, you do get what you pay for. So I'm totally on board with what you need to do to make our technology run to the level that makes it efficient for us and saves us money in that respect.
Thank you. Other comments or input? Seeing none, we're down to about 20 minutes or so, a little over 20 minutes. Dana, we'll look at line 65, water meter reading software. So we had a bit of an answer on here, and I wasn't sure that they were meeting. One of the comments in here, we weren't sure, it looked like whether our new software would actually be talking to our new meters that we just put in. So that was what Steve, I guess maybe you can clarify that. I'm sure there's a fix for that. But if you could talk to this a little bit.
So I'm back on here. Yes, this system does integrate and is provided by the same manufacturer that we have meters installed from, and currently with our meter reading programming. So it is single source. I think sole source was discussed there. We'd work on sole source element. I believe the current product is qualified through the state to do so. So there are options, but we've had Census before. All of our system on the integration and reading side has been Census, and now the meters again are replaced with Census meters. So fairly proprietary, but as well as the FlexNet system is Census product, and they do all work harmoniously. IT had some questions. I'll get them answers on system implementation, but I think that was that. There were some thoughts on time. I'm not sure if I answered that appropriately, but like I said, that was pretty feverishly getting things going today. So,
Steve, could you explain just a little bit? It says the ROI on this system is less than 9.4 years. Could you explain to simple people like me what that means?
yeah, so return on investment, and that is typically cost of installation and implementation divided by years of payback. And the years of payback I used in this was the hours of time saved annually. It is very conservative. I put in 500 hours, which, what is that? 40 hours, just over 40 hours a month. When I know there are plenty of months that is certainly the minimum we provide. So certainly seasonally it peaks, leak time it peaks, move in, move out. So that's a little bit of a real estate peak, which seems to be fairly flat and constant nowadays. So every time we have to engage a citizen, most of the time it is based in the field. Again, whether it's a shut off, a turn on, a move in, a move out, all those are physical elements that we have to send a staff member out to do. Shut offs are the same. So system improvements and implementation will allow all those activities to happen instantaneously via software, and then the communication between the devices and the person, seeking the question. And we'll also give the customer their own access, like you have now with your utility billing, but you'll be able to, see instantaneous meter reads in 15-minute increments, I think it was. So you're
Steve, what's the lifespan on these? So the payback is 9.4 years to recoup our money. What's the lifespan for these?
I think it's second generation, so I can't see it stretching more than 10. Now it does live with the meters in that sense, and the meters typically last us 20, so it's in that ballpark.
Okay. Well, I think the good news too, it's certainly a big expenditure, but if it saves time for our personnel and they can spend that time doing other important work on the utilities, that would be huge.
Yeah, and it is not that everybody at City Hall doesn't know now, but right, you can make a phone call and any number of people will answer the phone. So sometimes it's much more efficient for certain people to get on the phone than others, and they then send a message around and try to get data and get you in contact with someone. So I mean, there's plenty more efficiencies to be had, and I was being, again, very conservative with a personnel loaded $75 an hour. So I think there's
good.
A lot more support in that system.
Thank you, Steve. Questions or input from council members? I don't see any. So let's move on to line 67. This is on interns. Question came up. We had talked about having interns, and we had information put in here. Dana, could you explain that to us? Just kind of the answer to that question.
Sure. So we budgeted for 3 interns in each year, one in planning, engineering, and one in finance. Although apparently Steve didn't know you budgeted him an intern, but I'm sure he'll be happy if he gets one. And we budgeted $5,000 per intern, which is about 0.1 FTE each. So.
Boy, the sky is
and there's grants available. We would apply in finance. We would apply for a grant again. I don't know if we would get it because they kind of rotated around, but we'll try every year. So.
Probably hear some thunder out there. I just saw some lightning coming down over top of us. Councilmember Lingle, you have a question?
Well, I've been a longstanding supporter of internships. Just to throw this out, it's also occurred to me that our city clerk could use an intern. And I'm going to immediately go back to CIP and the Third Avenue project, because one of the things our public works director was sure to disclose to us is that there's a lot of community involvement that will be necessary related to that project. And I wouldn't be surprised if we are going to use interns, for example. I think this is what it says in the budget book, that might be a possibility. My guess is we would need more than $5,000 into interns for the Third Avenue project if that was to be funded. And I really don't know. I mean, I noticed in Steve's earlier presentation, it's still not clear to me exactly how much staff project management we can charge to grants. And I guess that's a follow-up. Because when you look at a complete line of business, you really want, and you do a total development cost, even if you're not funding it a specific way, you do want to know how much your project management costs are. So again, I guess what I'm saying is the city clerk might benefit from an intern. She's got an awful lot of work that she has to do. And I suspect engineering will need more than $5,000 for the Third Avenue project.
Other comments? Councilmember Brunicki.
Yeah, I would agree because I hire interns and just for my little business, it's $5,000 for a summer for one intern. So I definitely think for the kind of things you're looking for, you will need more than 5,000, I'm thinking.
Dana, are interns technically considered part-time employees? Or is there a separate category? I know there's volunteers, I'm trying to,
Yeah. They're considered part-time employees. They don't receive any benefits. So most of the internship or the money goes towards salary, which is nice. And for our intern, we got just over 200 hours from him. I think it was like 212 hours for $5,000, which was a bargain. But and then there's programs like I was thinking the city of Bellevue, or not the city of Bellevue, but Bellevue Community College has a internship program where they come and they get credit for working for us, and you don't necessarily.
Hello, did we lose them?
We may have, and I was actually just gonna, when Dana stopped, if Mayor Pro Tem will let me, the clerk notified us that the power flickered at City Hall.
yeah.
And Ms. Thomas may not be able to lead the meeting as far as host the meeting, so I've asked the clerk to find out an alternative arrangement. But we will figure out what happens if the power does go out.
So potentially we can call in on the phone, isn't that correct?
Correct.
The internet may go down, our computer system, and we run out of power. Your phones are powered separately. So there's
Correct.
potential that we could actually go in and call in and still be able to get business done over the phone.
Yes,
I'm
and
not
I
sure how
think
that works exactly, but I think we can still hear each other and be able to move forward.
I think the only challenge there becomes how the clerk records the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it would work. I can always go down to Public Works because they're on an automatic generator. So worst case scenario, if we're in the middle of the meeting and I don't have the opportunity to reassign the hosting capability to somebody like Steve or somebody else, then the meeting would actually end. And I would just say, give me 10 minutes and I'll be back online. I don't know if anybody else can start the meeting besides me and Laura. So that's the only thing. Laura and I are listed as the hosts. So if she can do it from Texas, then great.
She might not be able to make the meeting tonight.
Yeah, so just we'll see what happens. Could be interesting.
So hang on, council. I see more flashes of lightning out here. So
Yes.
the rain's coming down sideways now. Any other comments or input? So we'll move on to our next item. I believe that's line 69, Dana.
Mayor Pro Tem Remington, we have a council member asking what number we call into, and you would go into the Zoom invite and click the one click that has the phone number that provides the password and gets you in. So if you go into, you would need your phone obviously to check that calendar invite, and then as well, you should be able to just click on the link if you've got it on your phone and be able to log in. So sorry, Mayor Pro Tem, I just wanted to make sure that we got that through to folks.
Amir, thank you. We also on our calendars have the closed session and an executive session as well. So those are all listed there on your calendar invite. Questions?
Are we on 69?
Dana, could you pull up 69 for us? This was a question regarding project information, total costs. It's much more in depth than that, so that's my Cliff Notes.
And which number did you want me to look at?
Line 69, please.
Okay.
So this was a question about outstanding grant applications, match requirements, project management, and other staff time for each project should be submitted to council. Dot, did you want to talk to this?
Well, when I wrote this question, it was a couple of days ago, and Steve answered a chunk of this with his presentation, and he said we're going to get an updated CIP chart and so forth. I think the piece of this question that we're in the process of answering is knowing what kind of pre-development funds he needs. And he knows what he needs on the design side, it seems. And I want to make sure he has money for independent estimating as he goes through those processes. I know that isn't something he's felt like he had a liberal or any allocation for, but that's a concern, because what we have is a lot of moving targets on CIP, and the key to his being able to have a check and balance on his designer is the ability to, get some access to an on-call estimator or something, in any one of the trades. And I have asked Steve for copies of the outstanding grant applications that are priorities, and I'm going to be taking a look at those before our next council deliberation on the budget, because I want to understand his staff impacts better, and I want to make sure he's got the resources, as we make our final decisions. So that's where it was all coming from.
Are there additional questions for council? It sounds like Councilmember Lingle got a lot of that, or we all did, from Steve's presentation, Director Laniszewski's presentation on CIP. Any additional questions? Not seeing any. Line 71 is the maintenance 1 position. And there's in the notes, there's some information there. I assume those were, Dana, did you write those, or was that Steve?
That was Steve.
Was that Steve? Steve, could you just explain that for us? I think it was well written. It's fairly self-explanatory. And just for any citizens that might be listening, could you explain what the M1 is, the maintenance positions, and some of these we've abbreviated?
Yeah, so the maintenance 1 position that is proposed in the process is a water maintenance worker 1. I have had questions and good discussions relative to general maintenance for public works versus this kind of specific task of water only. So as we move forward, we will be coming to council in the next few meetings when we can get some time on. First will be water comprehensive plan and bringing the update to that forward. And part of that work I showed in a slide under the 401 presentation was, the amount of work we need to and should expect to get done in the hours of allotted time it should take to do those tasks. Those are fairly accurate numbers, and that table presented us with being understaffed. And I know utilities are different than general fund, and that's totally understandable. But I think the work we need to do for our water system, as well as sewer and storm, we do dedicate a great resource to sewer. We have dedicated employees. We are trying to move into that direction for the other utilities because they have so many, there's so many consequences of not doing the work that we need to get done, public health wise, physical property wise, and the investment in our system and, for any of the utilities is significant. It is an enormous asset we need to manage, and we need to do a better job, and the better job comes with more help and more horsepower. So this is getting us to move into the right direction and categorizing folks to get specific work done on an uninterrupted and dedicated basis. So I don't know if we want to talk about more than that, but the water fund has that, the parks worker, these are important elements, just bar none, as we again, everybody knows how much there is to do. We want to do a great job, and we want to be able to focus on the job we do. And it is hard to do that in the way we go about our business currently. And the strategy that, worked out with Joe and with his support and, thoughts moving forward is to begin to segregate some of the work, because it gets, it can just overburden the employees on time, right? It's non-dedicated time. Things interrupt us all the time. So, not having that happen to certain parts of our workflow would be amazing. And coming online, we have more parks. People, you saw the surveys, they love getting out, walking, whether it's sidewalks and parks. And, there's a lot to do. And we've worked it out where the parks worker is a different scale. So I think that's, hopefully we can get that filled and everybody supports that, and we can move forward with those labor increases as presented.
Thank you. Questions from council? Councilmember Naplin.
So I had this conversation already with Director Laniszewski about, well, this isn't specifically about the water maintenance, but it also has to do with the park position. To leave those positions flexible, so you can assign whichever person you want to be that dedicated water person, or I don't know if that's even a possibility. I know with the wastewater treatment plant, that's weird. Those are operators, so they have to have certain very specific training. So it does make sense that you're hiring someone specifically to be an operator for the wastewater treatment plant. But for our maintenance workers, can you maintain a level of flexibility so that you aren't just, pigeonholing that one person to only being able to do this one thing? We're hiring you to do water, and if all hands on deck, you can't go do something else because you're the water person. Does that make sense? I just like to maintain more flexibility so we wouldn't have to have a situation where we needed help with something else and it was like, oh, well, now this person's working out of class because their job is technically the water person. And the same is for parks. I feel like a lot of the additional work that has come more recently is not just parks, but it, right-of-way maintenance, the landscape maintenance, just all of those type of duties that feel like they're very similar to parks maintenance. And so I just want to make sure, I know it says parks, I don't want to get into a situation where we're, going to have to pay someone out of class because, oh, wait, I'm mowing the lawn here, but now I'm going to mow the lawn and it's sort of a right-of-way, not technically labeled a park. Anyway, I just to make sure it's clear, it might be helpful to even have the position say 10% allocation to streets, maybe. I just want to bring that up. I feel concerned.
Yeah, so the budget as proposed is the parks worker is 100% parks. And I think that is splitting hairs in the sense that, the streets fund and the parks fund are essentially general fund elements. Mm-hmm. Identifying the split, if that's, again, you put FTEs in the budget, you don't want to be presumptuous, right? So we have to have the conversation and discussion, which is fantastic. And again, yeah, if we're on board with the workload, great. We need to fine tune the splits. That's totally fine. The job description is flexible with landscape maintenance, right? So it's parks and other landscape elements. I think, as we all know, right-of-way landscape is secondary. Parks landscape, unfortunately, is mow-based and is primary because it grows faster. But yes, weed inundation and everything else. So routine work will have such a tremendous visual improvement to what we do have. And I think Councilmember Naplin is completely correct. Everything we have added in the last 2 to 3 years has been visual. It's on Main Street. You see nothing else but it. So we have no problem with that element of the parks worker being split, and the job description covers, doing the routine landscape, mowing, weeding, planting, maintenance citywide. But again, the intent is parks. So parks and right-of-way certainly do go and can go hand in hand. But we have a lot of parks. I think the presentation on parks, 13 parks, 2 more coming on. Big Rock Park itself is just so specialized. it's overwhelming. And my intent too, and I know there are side effects of having organized labor that we will work with, and there are some things we are kind of stuck with. And I do, just so everybody is clear, if the maintenance water happens, it would be, we're hoping an internal move, because we have competent personnel who would like to explore that specific niche that creates an internal vacancy. Then my intent, and working with Joe, is to convert that to a parks specific worker. So we have a parks basic worker in the budget as proposed. We have a water worker. We create a vacancy, and then with a union, we will work on converting that to have 2 parks workers, which essentially will take all the parks worker work off of the other personnel's plate to then do facilities, of course, water and storm, and just, I don't want to.
When do the new Toll Brothers parks, when do we have to take over their maintenance? Because I know typically they have to maintain it for a certain amount of time before they sort of hand it over.
I can check on that in the development agreement. I would imagine it says typically the first 2 years are on them, but I'll have to check on that, and I can email the group.
Because I'm just contemplating that maybe we could hold off on the second parks worker until that other park comes online, possibly. It's just a lot of employees all at once. I mean, the wastewater treatment plant, more maintenance worker type person was a position that was semi-authorized, was budgeted, but it was, the intent was for that position to be temporary, to have an overlap while we waited for someone to retire so that there could be some training that happened. But it was never really authorized as, oh yes, we intend forever to have this extra position. It was kind of, we just didn't know when that one person was going to retire, and we wanted to prepare. And then the parks worker that, technically we aren't calling it a new position. It really is a new position because council never authorized that position. We put a placeholder in there and said, hey, we really need to have a greater discussion on what is the best method of getting, seasonal work done. And we already use a seasonal employee program, and it's been pretty great. Could we also use some contracting? We've done that in the past as well. Historically, I can't remember how long we did that, but I think when the first phase of Main Street came on, we used some contracting. So we really wanted to explore what is the best use of taxpayer funds, what can get it done in the most efficient way. So really, that would be adding 3 public works employees all at once. It'd be fulfilling the parks worker that we really never had authorized, filling the wastewater treatment plant position, which we had never authorized to be filled once the person retired, and then another water employee. So that's 3 all at once. And I'm just thinking about the last year, how much work we've done with switching over the meters. That's taken a lot of work. I mean, they were out in my neighborhood in the middle of the week during the day, a crew of them coming to do it. And so obviously that's taking a lot of their time. So anyway, I fully understand that we are short-staffed, that it would be incredibly helpful to have more staff. I'm just wondering if we could phase in some of these new positions, maybe look at when do those new Toll Brothers parks come online. It just feels like an awful lot of upstaffing all at once. And, yes, we have user rate fees to pay for water and sewer, but the reason you need to be careful is, those rates were set based on our current level of the employment. And so you would think if we're adding employees, our rates are going to go up. And I just would feel really uncomfortable about raising rates on our customers, our citizens right now in the middle of a pandemic. So those are all my thoughts. I kind of went on a little bit long.
Oh, no, Jennifer, thank you. I'm going to jump in. We've got about 10 minutes before council, and I want to give everybody a break. So this is that point in the movie where you're on the edge of your seat and they go to commercial. So we'll continue this.
Mayor Pro Tem, can
Yeah.
we have Steve address some of those points before we go so we can close the loop on that?
Well, I think employee positions are going to be a greater discussion, and we have 3 hours next Tuesday starting at 5:30. Certainly if council wants to continue, but I think, we can certainly continue this discussion, talk about employees, give you a 10-minute break. So Mayor, I would support adjourning now, and we'll get back to this. We'll get a chance to talk about it. It's an important topic. So we'll dive right back in first thing next Tuesday. So without objection, sorry, Steve.
Question. So there's an item on the council agenda. What is the intent with the budget item on the council agenda?
The ordinance read?
I don't know. There's
So
The final public hearing for the budget, and then there's the second official touch of the ordinance. So probably updates since the last meeting, I would assume, but that's up to Dana.
all righty. Well, thank you, everybody. With that, we are officially adjourned. We'll see you at our city council meeting at 7 o'clock. Thank you.